Hello, everyone. I'm not going to dance this year, I'm sorry. You will have to wait for next year. I'm really happy to be here for the third time. I can see that there is more people than last year. Okay, let's go straight to the point. I'm going to talk about Nuxt.js. So who have heard or used Nuxt.js here? So I will say everyone, because no one can see. That's great, but I will just recap. So Nuxt.js, it was hard to have a definition. I'm trying on this one. Let's see if next year it's the same. Nuxt is a JavaScript framework based on Vue.js. So I think you know that. Right now it's based on Vue 2. Vue router, Vuex, which is optional if you have the store directory, and Vue meta that we maintain. So Nuxt is also shipped with Webpack 4. Soon we will support Webpack 5 as soon as it's released. We have Babel 7 and PostCSS 7. That's the logo. So you can run Nuxt dev in development and have hot module replacement, and Nuxt build to bundle your application for production. It also gives you a directory structure. So all of these directory and file are optional except pages. And there is more coming soon. It is performance oriented. So we have automatic code splitting for pages. We have the resource hints. So this link will prefetch and preload that Google Chrome recommends. So we have them. HTTP2 support. We have this smart prefetching feature. So when you have a link that goes to another page and it comes inside the viewport, we will automatically prefetch this JavaScript payload, a JavaScript chunk for you. And we also have this modern build that will become like the legacy build on the next version to target evergreen browsers. So we ship the minimum JavaScript code for your application. And we care about developer experience. That's why when you start Nuxt dev, you have a fancy loading screen on your browser, because I didn't want to wait in the terminal for the Webpack build to be done. It can take like 30 minutes. I'm thinking of adding a game, because sometimes Webpack can take a minute. We also have this hot module replacement indicator in the browser. We have Nuxt build -a or --analyze if you want to run Webpack bundle analyzer and see if you did some mistakes. It should not happen, but we have the option. And you can directly write Vue file, and we have the CSS and pre and post processor, so you can write stylers, post CSS with Tailwind, and use Sass, and etc. And we have a strong module system inspired by Webpack hooks as well, so you can change Nuxt core directly thanks to these hooks. And finally, we do server-side rendering, as you know. We also do static generation with Nuxt generate, and that will change a little bit. I will explain to you. And we also can do client-side application if you want to do back office and you don't care about SEO. Without touching a single live icon, well, this is mostly marketing. We have a config option, but you can do it with a command line. But it was less sexy. So I'm going to talk quickly about some of the change for Nuxt 2020. OK, 22 minutes left. So SSR option, and that will be a Boolean, true or false. Actually, it will replace this mode, which is universal OSPA, that is more confusing than what it is actually. It means, do you want server-side rendering or not? And the --SPA for Nuxt build or Nuxt dev will become --no-SSR. So I think this makes more sense for users. We are working with the composition API, and I've been playing last week with the Swerve library, which is for data fetching. So here I'm using use Swerve. I don't know how to pronounce it. And I'm giving an API path, and I'm using root, which is the main instance. So I have access to $HTTP, which is like a Nuxt plugin, $get. And I have access to data and error, which is a reactive value that I return here. And I can use it in my template. And I've did a trick to use server prefetch and get current instance. So we can actually wait for this API call to be done before server render. and we automatically handle the hydration directly with this module, with this Vue plugin. And it works on SSR and it works on client side, which is good. And with Vue 3 async setup, it will be even easier to make it work. And we can also imagine use fetch and use async data directly in your setup method. So this brings me to the new fetch. Who have heard about the new fetch feature? Well, some people, OK. So if you're not aware, we have actually a fetch method, but it will be deprecated for this new fetch, because actually you can do the same behavior by using a middleware. This is more powerful because you have access to this. So this is interesting. You can use it everywhere, layout, page, components. So you can have components that do data fetching. You have an option if you want to only fetch on client side. You also work with full static generation. So even if you use a component that fetch a WordPress page, and with the full static generation, it will be saved as a payload and it hydrated. I'm going to do a demo. But we have a different behavior than async data on client side. So I try to draw something, not myself, but you can imagine. So I have my page A. I click on a link to go for going to the page B. This little arrow is like the loading screen you can see on page A before going to page B. So first we call the middleware. If you throw an error or redirect, you will don't go to page B. Then we call page B async data. That's why you don't have access to this. Then when it's done, we can directly show this page. And then we have this new view. And with the new fetch, you have access to fetch state.pending. You can also use slots. And then fetch is being called. So this means you have to handle this loading on the client side by using some placeholder. And if you have a component, it will also call fetch. As you can see, this is waterfall, but with Vue 3, it will be in parallel. Actually, it can happen in parallel, but it depends if you have a subcomponent, depending on the fetch of the parents. And on server side, it's quite simple. We just wait until the end of the fetch, so we can directly render the HTML. Let's show a quick demo, because even with this, I'm not sure to understand what I explained. So I have my page here. I will start my server. Let's see this fancy. This is what I was talking about. Really, really important. So I have my next HTTP module that will just inject this .HTTP. I'm going to call GitHub. I have just a plugin to set a token. I will zoom. So on my index page, I have my async data method, and I'm calling Nuxt to list my repo. So if I refresh, I have my list of repo. And when I navigate, I don't have a loading state, because async data is called before showing the page, the home page. But I'm going to use fetch instead. So I don't receive a context anymore. I cannot return data, since it's not made for it. It's made to mutate the data. So I have to use data and keep the Vue best practices. And then I can directly do this.repo. So if I refresh, it tells me that HTTP is not defined, so I have to do this.HTTP. And now if I refresh, I have the same result as async data, but what's happening when I navigate is you can see that I have a flash happening. So for this, I will have to handle fetch state.pending, loading repos. And this way, I can directly show like some placeholder. What's interesting also is that in your template, you can have a button. And when you click, you call $fetch. Refresh. That's not possible with async data, That's more tricky. Now it will automatically recall fetch. You also work with keep alive if you want to add some cache directly and more fancy stuff. I'm going to show you on a dynamic page what I have. I'm importing these two components, repo and contributor. I'm giving them some props. Here my repo name. I'm going to the repo.view. So here, instead of using this fetch state, I'm just giving dummy data. So when I navigate here, that's how it looks like. And I have my contributors.view. It's the same. I'm just loading the contributor. So if I refresh here, I will have everything server rendered. And if I set fetch on server false, what's happening here is the fetch will be only called on client side. So you can really control at the component level how you want to data fetch. That's it for fetch. You can also use the functions if you want to fetch only if it's a bot, like a crawler. Otherwise, you do it on client side. You can do whatever you want. It's available right now with Nuxt Edge, and it will be released in Nuxt 2.12 in the following weeks. Another feature I've been working on the last weeks, months actually, is this target. It's quite difficult because we can do server-side rendering, static generation, SPA. Target is here to simplify. When you create a Nuxt application or a Vue application, you mostly know where you're going to host it. So target server means that you want to host your Nuxt application because you want server-side rendering on a Node.js hosting platform. So this can be Heroku, DigitalOcean, EC2, or any Node.js hosting. So with this target server, which is the default value, you run Nuxt dev, same as actual, Nuxt build, that will bundle your Vue application in .nuxt/dist, and Nuxt start to start your production server with the production bundle. So this doesn't change if you used to use Nuxt, that's you already know. Target static is the new mode, and it also opens more possibilities like serverless, but that's not the topic right now. We have static for static hosting, like Netlify, Surge, Now, or any other static, like S3. So you have Nuxt dev. He actually starts the development server, but he gives process.static, and we try to mimic as much as how it will look like in production. So you won't have access to rec or res in the async data, in the context. If you hit a 4.4, it won't do server-side rendering. It will do the fallback strategy that we have when you do the generate. We have Nuxt build that will bundle your app. And we have Nuxt export that will create the dist directory and pre-render the routes. So we actually separated Nuxt generate in two commands, Nuxt build and Nuxt export. Why? Thanks for asking. That's I know you guys are here. It's to give the same developer experience in development as on static hosting for development. We also plan to have Nuxt serve to serve the dist directory, so you can test it like it is on production. It also gives, so by separating the build and the pre-rendering, which is for the content, we have faster static generation on content change. So this means that if you change your content on your CMS, you can have a hook that only calls Nuxt export because you don't have to go through Webpack anymore. So you can save 20 seconds to, 1 minute if it's a big application, because we just generate the HTML. And it will depend on your API response, actually. We also did a crawler to generate your dynamic routes, so you don't have to specify generate.routes anymore. And we have the full static support. When you use Nuxt generate right now, it saves the page payload. So when you go to a page, you have the iteration. But when you navigate, it's still calling async data and the API. With this full static support, I'm saving the page payload right now as a JSON file, but we will improve to support date and this fancy type. And we mock async data and fetch, so we directly fetch the payload. So you have a truly offline application ready when you have the PWA module. And we also added this smart prefetching feature to fetch also the payload of the next page. Let's demo this. So right now I have target server. I'm changing it to static. So now Nuxt is telling me that I'm running in development with the universal rendering, which is SSR, and static target. We won't see that many difference on our demo, but if I go to 440, I can see that I'm not server rendered. That's like some small changes. For development, that's not a huge change. But now I'm going to build my application. So if you deploy to Netlify, instead of calling Nuxt generate, you will call Nuxt build and Nuxt export. And we hope that we can find a way to have a special hook where you can only call Nuxt export, so it will be way faster, and maybe saving some money on the deployment. So that's my build, and that's my export. So as you can see here, I didn't give any clue to Nuxt about the dynamic pages. It just figured them out because I've used NuxtLink to link to this page, like Google will guess your links. And then so this is running on 5,000. So I have this fetch, which is actually the payload. Because of the smart prefetching, you can disable it, because we have all of this link at the same viewport. Now when I navigate, actually I don't have this loading effect, except for this component that I said fetch on server false, so I cannot save the payload. But this is not calling GitHub anymore, except for these contributors components. So I have my full static application working. And yes, that's how you can do fetch on server. You can also specify that I want full static, but for this special component, I don't want you to save the fetch result or async data as in the payload. So for this, you can say static to false. We will work on the documentation to make sure that you understand where the difference. But for the export, let's go back to my documentation here. I want to change this. So we can imagine this will call a hook that we directly call Nuxt export. And then we have our content updated live. And it took us like 6 seconds on this one. So that's it for the target static. This is not released yet. I will be working with the team on the documentation, make sure everything is smooth. And we can expect it in March or April. Functions directory, this will be a new feature where you can run server-side code directly, and we will make it work also with the static target, but Puya will be talking about this. I also have another news to say. I'm happy to say that now we have a Nuxt company, and we have raised $2 million of a seed round with first minute capital. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. So that's these people help us to raise this. And we will be mostly working on Nuxt 3, making sure that Vue 3 come out. When Vue 3 come out, Nuxt 3 will be ready. Documentation, we have a lot of work on the documentation. Example, integration, that will be our main focus. Also being able to work full-time on it and doesn't depend on workshop. That is such a great gift, and this is really thanks to you guys. And the community part, we will be working a lot to make sure that any contributors will be rewarded. And encourage people to contribute even more on the open source project. And if you want to keep in touch, we have the GitHub, Nuxt.js Twitter. We are also on Discord. We have a booth over there if you want to ask us some questions. We have some beanies. We only brought 100. So if you guys want to buy one, and because I know it's pretty cold right now, you can have a Nuxt beanie. I'm Sébastien Chopin. I'm the author of Nuxt.js. You can find me on ATNux. Also, one more thing. My partner and I are expecting a baby, a Nuxt boy, in June. So I'm happy to share. So, thank you. So Nuxt 2020 is going to be interesting. Thank you very much.